Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you, Sarah, for having us all here today. Look, I mean, this is talent is a super hot topic, and it's on everybody's mind. And I think the first portion of my moderating experience is going to be turning it over to Michael to give us a little bit of a backdrop on what you're seeing in terms of talent trends in the space. And all the good stuff that everybody always wonders about, which is, salary and perks and, hybrid or remote or, everything in between. So maybe we can tee up a little bit of the data that you've collected to share with the audience. And then we'd love to dig into some of that and ask some questions along the way.
Sure. All right, Deepali, thanks. And maybe first what I'll do is tee up where this stimulus came from. So we have roughly 150,000 data scientists and data engineers in our marketplace. And this is data we've collected really over the past 13 years of individuals. So what we do is we utilize really the talent that we have in our marketplace to collect data on what's important to them. So I think to kick off the conversation, we'll share some of that today, and that can lead into some further points that we're going to make. So first and foremost, this is really what is most important to a data scientist. This was a poll that we just did recently, and you'll see that compensation is number one, but not by a very far margin. Quickly after compensation, there are critical elements that are important to the decision-making process for individuals accepting a position. One is the work that they're doing. Is it interesting? Does it have a business challenge or an application that is truly impacting an organization or a purpose? The second piece is around, we call it good management, but this is a deep topic. So if I double click on it, it's really about structure. How is the organization structured internally, and what is their commitment to analytics? Is analytics really viewed as a value driver? These are questions that are coming up in the interview process, and the data scientists and the data engineers are interviewing the client just as much as the client is interviewing them. Yeah. So these are some pretty important elements that are, as you can see, just as important as compensation that should be taken into consideration. Next, what we'll talk about too coming up is flexibility. So we've heard a lot about flexibility, hybrid, work from home. This is another very important element. And just by a slim margin, good management, flexibility, and interesting work are just as important as critical decision-making criteria as compensation is today. So next, this is probably not going to come to any surprise, but we have seen the most significant inflation in compensation since we've been in this industry. Right now, Wall Street Journal just reported that 9% salary increase for job switchers, we call them, is the highest and most unprecedented really increase that they've seen. Well, we've polled our internal marketplace as well, and what we have found is that actually with job switchers over the past 12 months in data science, they're receiving 20% increase or more. This is very, very significant margin compared to the national average across all skills. So here's to double click on it. Of the 51% or more that we've polled are receiving 20% of an increase in compensation or more. So this is leading to a lot of things. One, obviously high attrition. Companies considering how to right size their current benchmarking. And also it's causing a lot of demand for candidates to seek new opportunities if they're feeling like they're not compensated up to market standards. This one is something that we're watching very, very closely, and we partner with an organization called WIDS, Women in Data Science. We are finding that there is some disparity in terms of gender, sometimes in terms of compensation, and also in what they're looking for as well. So you can see from the individual contributor perspective how important flexibility is in the management ranks also. And these things should be taken into consideration when truly putting together a DE&I strategy that works for an organization. This one we were really surprised on. This is a survey about work from home. I think what we have seen and what we have mostly read in the media is that fully remote is the preference right now, and that is what's most acceptable with many employers. We've actually found something different. We polled just a subset of our clients, 175, and this was Fortune 500 organizations. And the vast majority of them are actually moving or in a hybrid model as of last week. So hybrid modeling, I think, is really where we believe the trend is going to be, not fully remote. This probably doesn't come to any surprise, but different categories of the tenure of a professional in data look for different things. So we also have, inside of our data sets on talent, different categories of tenure. And you'll find that what we call the IC1 and the IC2 in our reports, which is 0 to 6 years as an individual contributor, compensation is number one. I mean, they have a lot of expenses for the first time. They want to make sure that they also have a strong growth trajectory that's communicated to them upfront in the interview process. But this quickly changes when you move to the manager ranks. We call it MG1 and MG2. And this is tenured managers who have leadership experience, and they're looking for different things than the ICs are, specifically IC1 and IC2. And those things are interesting work and really influence over the organization and how an organization really views and or values analytics. These things should be pulled out in the interview process to really attract.
But Michael, as you're talking about, there's a lot of different dynamics at play in the data science talent market, right? And there seems to be a little bit of a mismatch between, sort of supply and demand. And there are other organizations out there, nonprofits, for example, vying for this talent. How do they compete? How can they compete?
Well, we look at it in two kind of cohorts, I would say. One is attracting, and then one is retaining the talent you have. When it comes to attracting talent, we really believe that these are the marquee items that I've just put up on screen. And I'm going to kind of run through them a little bit more granularly real quick, because I think it's a very, very relevant topic, and I think this is where we can get a lot of value from today's conversation. Title matters. And we've been very surprised by that, but title absolutely matters. We've had more turn downs based on title, and sometimes this is somewhat challenging because you have an old naming convention based on, maybe a mismatched place within the organization, or bands that just have not been updated yet.
Well, on that note, John, coming out of Microsoft and sort of the spans and layers, how would you advise to combat that if you have a very large company that's sort of, entrenched in that?
Yeah, it's definitely a huge challenge. I mean, the reality is, and I'll address actually that and your comment about nonprofits, which is a key space. I mean, the reality is more than 50% of AI resources in the world exists in high tech and fintech, and actually nonprofits are less than 5%. And there's a reason for that. It's all the things that he was describing earlier: the compensation, the title, the ability to grow rapidly. But there's also the other side of it, which is what's tugging at data scientists and which helps this directly, which is the purposeful mission. The reality is most data scientists that you speak to, real hardcore data scientists, what they want is they want the compensation from a Microsoft, but they want to stay in academia.
Right.
How do they do that? How do they get both? How do they get to have both? And how, as you a manager, regardless of your organization, whether you're a nonprofit or you're in high tech or you're wherever you are in the world, how do you attract and retain talent? And I would argue that while compensation is important, and I agree with you, particularly in the younger years of people coming out of school and trying to get that, there are other intangibles that you need to help people with. Structure is an important thing. Like, you come out of school and you know what? I grow this way, and I go from this class to this class, and I get a degree in this, and I get certified in this. You take a data scientist and you drop them in this crazy world of hybrid, and you put them on a Teams or a Zoom call, and you say, Here, you need to now collaborate. You're crushing them. They don't know what it means to work from 9 to 5. They don't know what that requirement means. And so there's a lot to it.
Yeah, so some nonlinear
There's a lot of
action
stuff.
that
There's a
needs to
lot of
happen. So I'd actually like to have you continue those points, but Meghan, I'd like to ask you, just in terms of some of the more purposeful jobs that are out there, and I'm sure the data that you're mining specifically for Spencer, ESG related jobs, and some of the job specifications that you might be looking at. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's been shifts in the roles that, Spencer Stuart as an executive search firm is hiring for and what clients are looking for. From a data science perspective with my team, I think it's really about explaining to them what is it that we can impact and how does that translate into their work, right? So the work that we are doing, if we can make the search process more efficient, more effective, less biased, even if those are very small amounts, because of the scale at which the organization operates, we can have an enormous impact in who gets selected as leaders of large organizations around the world, thereby impacting those organizations, right? So I think telling the story of how the work we're doing translates into business value for the organization and then impacts societally, right, is part of the story around that, right? I think just one other piece on sort of the meaning and purpose, we're very clear around what we are and what we are not, right? We're not, because we're a small team and a newer function, we need people who are more generalists than specialists. We need people who want to learn different parts of the role, right? So not just data, feature engineering. I don't have the luxury of having people dedicated to that. You also, I'm going to pull you into strategy conversations and budgeting, scale decisions. And right, so if you're interested in sort of the broad scope of what data science is and how it operates in organizations, that's a good match for us. If what you want to do is only cutting edge methodology on cutting edge tools with the largest data sets you can get your hands on, that is not us. And we're very clear about that up front so that we're attracting the talent that actually fits to our needs and who is actually going to enjoy the work once they arrive.
Makes sense. Michael, please fill us in on more.
Yeah, well, I think John and Meghan really hit on some very, very key topics, and it kind of is a culmination of something that we hear a lot from our customers, which is, can you help us put together an employee value proposition? Right. And we call it an EVP. And this is just a consistent way to keep your brand message across all of your different lines of business and functions, because at the end of the day, one thing that highlights a lot of how to attract great talent is just everyone being a talent scout and having the right kind of way to communicate what that employee value proposition is. And the things that we've discussed here and what we're highlighting are some of those key things to focus on in that EVP. So title, we talked about. Span of control is really important. And it's not just how many reports you have, but what's the influence you're going to have in a company. I think everybody wants that to a certain extent. Yep. But in data science and in data engineering, it's extremely important. What do they truly have in terms of autonomy and or influence to impact the business? Career trajectory, I think this one is something that we've all heard, but to John's point, not just, we're going to be able to promote organically. Here is how we're going to promote organically. Here's the roadmap to get you there, especially in that early IC 1 and 2. Branding and networking, we call this partnering with higher education and also being at industry events. Be recognized out there as an organization that invests in the community is really important.
So that's part of, approaching this specific data science or data engineering talent pool. But what are other strategies that other firms are doing in order to attract this talent, right? Like what are tell us a little bit about some of the more, out of the norm strategies that have been out there.
Okay, well, we try to steer this conversation away from compensation, but there are some compensation levers that are being played every single offer right now, guys. And the reason why, before I get to exactly what those are, is because they have multiple offers, and in the 9th inning, we see a counteroffer come through, and it's a doozy. And so we have to be able to compete against that. So sign-on bonuses, we are seeing equity with lower, more mid to small businesses. And we're seeing, that there's a tremendous amount of flexibility given. I think for the first time, there's a unique talent pool that a lot of companies who had geographic restrictions are being able to access now. And that's providing, a lot of flexibility for candidates.
Yeah, but I would argue, though, these are short-term discussions because you can attract the talent and have the wrong talent for your roles. You want people that are invested in what you're trying to do. They're excited every day. And the reality is, yes, it's a war for talent, but it's not company versus this, oh, I have this precious resource and I better get them over to my company. It's about ensuring that you have a great team for the future. I mean, my mission was announced actually at the United Nations to infuse AI and data to help solve world challenges. That's a crazy mission. But it was done purposely. It was done because we wanted to attract the best talent we could get in the world to solve world challenges, which, by the way, are based in business capabilities that can help solve those challenges. And so when you inspire people, when they're working on things like human rights and disaster relief, and at the same time creating amazing algorithms to drive business, they'll come and they'll stay and they'll grow. And so I agree that we are out of control with salaries, and we need to make sure that we control and put into place the structure for people to set the expectations right. But at the same hand, you have to inspire people. They have to love what they're doing, or it will not be a long-range relationship. And that's not the kind of talent you want anyway. You don't want somebody that's coming in because the dollars are there. You want them coming in because they can actually change the trajectory of the things that you're trying to do.
Well, it sounds like then firms have a real opportunity during the interview process to actually change the conversation.
Absolutely.
From compensation to purpose and role, opportunity, trajectory, et cetera. Meghan, maybe you want to tell us a little bit about how you think about your interview process. I mean, look, it's a hot talent market. Everybody doesn't have a lot of time. They're fielding a bunch of interviews at the same time. How do companies differentiate themselves, and what should that process look like?
So the way that we've approached it is sort of two or three different pieces. So one is ensuring that we validate the technical competence, right? That your technical chops are there for the level that we need for the particular role that we're hiring for. So we go through a case study process that's condensed but is meaningful, right? And has really helped us differentiate who we want to bring into the organization, at least on the technical side. And then it's really conversations around what the role is and is not, right? Like I was saying, what are the kinds of opportunities for projects and work? Who are you going to be working with? What does that look like? As well as getting them exposure to somebody on our business side, right? So that they can kind of see and feel, because executive search is not an area that most people are aware of as a place for analytics. It's still a very new area. And so getting them some sense of what that looks like on a real business perspective, so they have some sense of the right sort of to that future impact they're going to have. So I think those are a couple of pieces. And then really, I think it's the combination of giving them the right exposure to different sides of the organization while being condensed and concise in what you're doing, right? Nobody's going to go through 12 different interviews. And being very purposeful about the technical competence checks you're doing. I have friends who are highly competent in the field, and they've told me, I am not doing one more, coding test. Like, how many times do I have to do a code test to prove that I can code when I've been programming in 6 different languages for the last 15 years, right? So being very purposeful about what you do, and so it's time condensed, so you're not putting a big burden on people, but you're really learning what you need to learn as a hiring manager, and then moving on to other things in the interview process.
Well, I mean, I think we've gone through some machinations in the market around, assessments in general, right? So back in the day, and I'm going to age myself here, but Brain Bench was the test. Do you remember this, John? So, and now everybody wants to make sure that, technically we're bringing in the most technically apt people into the organization. However, you're right. I mean, with this, fever pitch of job interviews that people have lined up, it's hard for them to take another 30 minutes to do an online assessment and get out the. Actually, show of hands in the audience, how many of you during your interview processes have taken online assessments? Yeah. Okay. So quite a few of you. George. And how many of you hate doing it each time? Okay. All right. So, all right. But I think it's a necessary tool. It may be a conversation where the company itself has to figure out when to insert it into the process. And I think when you insert it into the process, maybe not so top of the funnel, and you're getting to know this person and having them buy into your organization, and then inserting it into the process. And they may be dinged at the end, but you've spent quality time with the person and having them buy into something and then check it out as well. So I think it's a hard thing to.
If I can just add one sort of point to that, to build on that, is that I think it's very important for the employer to be really thoughtful and purposeful about what they're doing, right? I have seen time and time again that organizations test on technical depth for a role where that technical depth is never actually needed.
Absolutely.
Right? Don't do that. I mean, that's insane.
Right.
Right? You're putting a lot of pain on candidates who then expect a job to be something that it turns out not to be. Right? So again, we're not necessarily, again, because of where we are in our journey, we're not necessarily looking for the most technically proficient people, because we need people to also be able to communicate and help with data literacy education at the organization and stakeholder management and a lot of other pieces that we desperately need, where the technical, yes, we need some minimum bar to be clear, but we want you to have critical thinking skills and a lot of other pieces that are far more important to us. And so that's what we interview for.
So no power tool, maybe, not a power tool, but a screwdriver on the assessment part.
Yeah. I mean, sort of choosing the right tool.
But
Absolutely.
I think the interview process there, what you just mentioned, the emotional intelligence piece and the leadership qualities that you're looking for, that's going to be very key. John, I'm going to come back to you. So, coming out of some of the larger tech organizations and some of these more purpose-driven orgs, how do you go about assessing those leadership and those emotional intelligence skills and kind of drawing them in?
Yeah, I think there's two sides to this equation. We've talked a lot about attracting talent. The other side of the equation is retaining talent, and they go hand in hand. I mean, the reality is you don't interview data scientists by non-data scientists alone. I mean, you want to have people talk to each other and get a community and understand what their leadership skills are. They can tell best whether somebody's going to lead or they're going to follow, how they're going to fit into the team, what the makeup is going to be. At one point in time, there was about 5,000 data scientists across Microsoft that we called the pipe of people. And we did everything to educate these people, but the best pieces of it were about creating a community where somebody could pick up the phone in another division in a large corporation and say, hey, I need that data, or I need to share an algorithm, or could you show me how you did this? That's how you create success. You don't create success by, oh, well, you're going to come into an organization and you're going to follow class 101 and go to class 102. And that's what you have to test for in the interview process, and you have to strengthen with individuals when they're there. Help them build the community. Help them build the networks. Help them get the connections. Because the reality is there really is no one size fits all, like you're describing, like, oh, well, I have a data scientist. In fact, just the term data scientist kind of gets me a little kind of nutty, because there's data engineers, there's data scientists, there's data analytics managers. What exactly are we looking for? We're looking for talent that fits a role today and hopefully a career tomorrow. And so hopefully all of you, even if you're working in a small company, are not hiring somebody for a role. You're hiring somebody so that they love the mission you're on and they can be part of that mission, not just today, but where the company's going in the future. Because if all you're doing is hiring for a role, that person could be gone tomorrow if the role's not there, or they fit within a role and that job changes. What a waste of time on both sides of the equation that was there.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, everyone has probably heard of, are you googly enough, or are you, everybody at Google's job was to recruit more people to Google. And so I think kind of drinking that Kool-Aid and having your organization speak to, others out in the market about why it's so good to work here should be sort of the manifesto in all organizations, large or small. And I think that in and of itself creates these retention strategies, right? So, the more that you're bought in and you're bringing other people in, it's a small way to kind of keep you there as well. But I want to get back to Michael's point on other, retention strategies that you're seeing in the market.
And to your point, everyone being a talent scout, and even what we call the boomerang effect, keep in touch with people who leave your organization as well. Oftentimes there's an opportunity that they'll come back within 2 years. So we see quite a bit of boomerang. John hit on some really fantastic points, and when it comes to retention, it is just as, if not more important than attraction, because you're always going to be in this kind of continuous flywheel. So with retention, I've shared a slide here, and I'm going to actually start at the bottom. Interesting work. And you have asked a question around, well, what are people doing that's unique to make sure that their full-time employees have interesting work? Well, they're aligning their FTEs to project work or to the work that's really moving the business. And they're actually bringing in consultants to backfill those FTEs on the BAU work or the business as usual, the run work. And so this is a way to have individuals feel like they're continuously learning, but also it's a way for them to feel more engaged in the more interesting work that the organization has to offer. A couple other retention strategies outside of compensation, keeping that aside, is the structure, making sure that the structure really does align. What we've seen, and we've had experience a lot with the CIO org and the CTO org. We've seen the CISO org obviously come up to be just as much of a peer to the CIO and CTO. It is not dissimilar to what we're seeing with the CDO and the CDAO right now.
Yeah.
So there are many organizations out there that are building a shared services model or a COE, a Center of Excellence, that supports the lines of business, just like we've seen that transformation in technology and security. Purpose we've hit on quite a bit. It's worth hitting on again. It's
purpose. It's purpose. It's purpose. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, especially, I think, Meghan, you brought up a really good point. Those that are out of school, they don't quite fully grasp that. But as you grow in your career, what matters in life? The people you work with and the mission you're on. I mean, it's not, what did I earn before? How much do I earn? I didn't even know what I earned when I left Microsoft. Somebody said, well, what do you earn? I don't know, whatever, it pays the bills. But what mission was I on? What are the people I communicate with? The things that I impacted in the world? I mean, there's a great book, I never forget it. There was an early manager that gave this to me when I had my first kid. And I wanted to be a manager. I was anxious to be a manager. Oh, I got to be a manager. He said, slow down. Read this book. It's called 7 Habits of Secret Success. Have you ever read that? Yep. Anybody ever read that? And there's a part of the book in the very first pages that says, write your own epitaph. Write what it's going to be when you're dead. What do you want people to say about you? And if you ask a candidate that, or you ask an employee that's like anxious to get ahead or anxious to get the extra dollar, just slow down. What is it that you want in life? It gives them a whole different perspective. They start realizing, wow, I want to work on a mission with people that matter. I want to change the world, or I want to do something that matters. And listen to Nick's speech this morning about what is Domino's mission. It's not to deliver a platform that people do things. It's to deliver a platform to help data scientists unleash the power of data science to change the world. Think how powerful that is. Think how powerful that is. You want to be on that mission? Absolutely. I don't want to be on a mission, I code every day. I go to school and I code every day. I get paid a lot of money, but I code every day. That's the last thing that humans want. And the best data scientists, I would pretend, will always want to be on a mission like that with great people and great mission.
I think to that point, and the one thing that we have to remember is that the onus is not only on the organization, right? It's on the employees as well. So whether you're on the market or you're not on the market, as an employee of an organization, it's up to you to be proactive, right? You can craft your own path if you're able to speak up and say, I want to work on these projects, or this is what's going to keep me here. Because quite honestly, none of these organizations want to lose talent. They don't want this knowledge capital walking out their door and going to their competitor. So you as an employee are at an advantage sitting there saying, I'm going to complete this. What else can I craft for myself within this organization? What else can I do? And I think taking a more proactive approach, don't wait around for the once a year performance review or the 3-month performance review. If there are things that you want to tackle, then you should be in that proactive seat helping the organization. And I think from a data science, or I'm sorry I'm saying data science, but from a data perspective, right? I've been recruiting, CDOs for the last 10 years, and they are getting a seat at the table, and these COEs are evolving. And I think because, these organizations have a seat at the table, you have a lot more onus on the outcome. And every organization is saying we want to be a data-driven business, right? So, and if they're not saying it, they're well behind the curve. And so, if you're in a data-driven organization, you should be able to go and take a seat at the table and drive, that effort. And I think that's just one big thing that employees can kind of own.
I think one of the things that cuts across a number of the themes that we've been talking about is a point that you had brought up around creating a sense of community, right? So I think to your point about organizational structure, in my opinion, that sense of community and creating a forum for a community to grow is more important than whether it's a centralized or decentralized or exactly how it looks on an org chart. Similarly with finding interesting work, with advocating for projects that you want to be a part of, if there is a community that you can learn from and bounce ideas off of and see what other people are doing, that then gives you some sense of what is available and what is out there and where things might go next, right? So I think that creating a community, regardless of organization size, regardless of team size, I think also cuts across hybrid, remote, in office, right? Location, right? All of those things. That community, to me, really cuts across a lot of the themes that we've been discussing.
Yeah, and I just add one thing, which is COVID has been a huge challenge for all of us, but it has really created a world of, hey, I like the flexibility, this is great, but don't assume flexibility is good for everybody. I mean, the reality is we need to be able to, as humans, connect with each other, particularly those that are early in their career. I mean, I remember working with this one woman on some really rough projects, and she came out of school. She's living in New Jersey. I'm sitting in Seattle, and I'm watching her day in and day out, and her father would be walking behind her, and her brother's working for Google in the background. Clearly, she was working in a small apartment. Do you know how much stress that is on somebody that just got out of school, has no connection, never walked into Microsoft? She was gone within 18 months. What an incredible talent lost in 18 months. And I think COVID created these blockers. We couldn't bring her into the office. You couldn't create this connection with human beings. And so I believe flexibility is good. It's very important. People want to have flexibility. They want to work whenever they want to work. This is not new because of COVID. Most of my data scientists did most of their best work at night because they were left alone and they could think and they could do their things. I never said to them they had to be in the office by 9 a.m. I didn't care as long as they get their work done. So giving people flexibility is great, but creating an environment where they're isolated is not good. Particularly for people that are young in their career. You want to encourage human-to-human connection. And to your point, especially in the medium and larger companies, creating community is not just in your department. The biggest value you can create for somebody in their career is to give them connections across their environment that they work in. Because as and particularly in data science, it's not a pure career. It's not like, you're a marketer and you do this and you go from this step to this step. Data science is still evolving. What is a data scientist? The data science 1, the data science 2. How do you get your work done? Data's in silos, tools are in silos. And sometimes who you know is more important than what you know. In fact, I'd argue in many cases, who you know is more important all the time than what you know. Sure. And you can't test for that on anything. It's, can you have a connection to get things done?
I want to make one more point before we open it up for questions. Talking about sort of the new normal is hybrid, but we need to be very careful about having flexibility but having a little bit of structure around it. The reason why I'm saying this is, if you have complete flexibility, you then start to think about how am I going to be inclusive, right? And so if they're only the, the partners that are coming in, it becomes sort of like, all right, we're going to go to the golf club and hang out, and this is my crew, and then everybody else is sort of hybrid remote, and we don't have any structure around what that hybrid piece means. And then you start having this exclusivity.
Yes.
So that's a really big point of how organizations need to tackle what the new normal is in terms of hybrid, but creating inclusive environments. And then that really kind of spans into diversity, inclusion, and all of these other, things that organizations are tackling. But I would say that, fully remote, just like this woman, be really careful that she doesn't feel excluded by not coming into the office, right? So that's another thing that I'm sure a lot of orgs are going to struggle with and kind of work through. I'd love to open it up to the audience and see what questions. All right.
She's gonna run with some mic so that you
There is a mic.
so that you can communicate with us.
Thank you. I'm interested in the question of expanding the talent pool. So assuming that there's a shortage of talent, which I think is probably a fair statement, to what extent are you seeing companies shifting their requirements for credentialing, alternative paths into the field? So are companies still insisting on degrees from top educational institutions, or are there increasingly paths toward a data science career that do not require formal educational credentials or different educational credentials?
I'll take that for just 1 second. These guys are probably going to be a little bit more equipped, but there are companies, so for example, Correlation One that I'm on the advisory board of is a data science boot camp. And what they do is they train data science, folks that are interested in data science for free. And they're sponsored by these companies that are trying to pipeline talent that's actually interested in this space. So there are, organizations like this out there that are trying to do the right thing and, be extremely inclusive for the talent that's trying to become data literate, data engineering, data science, et cetera. And the corporations are actually sponsoring this in order to, in a way to funnel this type of talent. But Michael, maybe you have a little bit.
It's a great question, and we're seeing a lot of reskilling. So organizations are investing into their people in different functions, sometimes in that Venn diagram, whether it is statistics, technology, or business, to move them a little bit closer to the data science function or the need that they have. Also, we have seen not as much of a demand for PhD level. And this is something that we have always had a lot of demand for, specifically at the statistician level or the OR level. So, we're seeing that is kind of coming down. So to your point specifically from a higher ed perspective, the degree requirement has loosened. I hope that helps.
I would answer this slightly differently. If you're a great hiring manager, you really want great talent, the education level is important. I mean, let's not knock, higher education, et cetera. It's super important. But really what you're looking for is a holistic person.
Right.
Somebody that can come into your organization that is interesting, that brings experiences, brings knowledge, is curious, is not afraid to say, hey, I am not an NLP expert, but I've really played a lot in NLP. And so I think it's incumbent on the manager that's hiring to be able to look for the person and the talent. And I always looked for that. I mean, we were thrilled when we would get somebody that was in another profession going over. I remember when we attacked COVID, which was heavy, we had a person from China that was a medical doctor, but he was curious about data science. And guess what? I was lucky enough to hire this guy in the middle of COVID to be able to help with machine learning, and most importantly, with his subject matter expertise. He was not a great data scientist by any means, but he was a great subject matter expert at a time when I needed that subject matter expert, and he's a pretty good data scientist today. And so you have to look for things as holistic in what you're trying to do, and diversity matters. I mean, having a team that mirrors the markets that you serve means that your algorithms will come out and they will be better.
I think we have another question here.
Hi guys, thanks so much for being with us today. I found the talk really, really interesting actually. So as a data science leader and a hiring manager, it can be really difficult sometimes trying to find the right talent for your team. And a lot of what you guys said really struck a chord with me, specifically Meghan, when you were talking about finding someone that's a good critical thinker. So my question is, do you have any tips or tricks for how to find someone like that during the interview process rather than someone that's just really proficient at coding?
Yeah, so, and I'm happy to connect and we can talk more offline too, but sort of a summary answer is, again, to tailor to what you're looking for, right? So an old way we used to do this early in my career was to give people an Excel sheet with a bunch of data and say, look at this for a couple minutes and tell me everything you can. Did you notice the outlier? Did you notice that there's, both numerical and text format in this column, right? Like just awareness of some of the challenges that might come up, right? So there's different ways to get at it. We don't prescript, in sort of the way that we interview, we don't prescript the coding language you should use, the algorithm you should apply, the approaches you should take. We're really trying to get at your thought process, right? So we don't use sort of an outside assessment. We sort of internally created a case study and said, we want to have a conversation with you and we want you to, solve the problem, but walk us through your thinking, right? That's what we're really looking for. I think the other part is we're looking for people who want to learn. If you believe you are an expert and what you know is the entirety of what you need to know, that's not a fit for us. It is a fit in other organizations and on other teams, but we want you to have interest in learning. So I think those two kind of complement each other, but happy to chat more.
Why don't we take one more question and then we'll all go to lunch.
So I know you guys had talked about sort of the differences for people earlier on in their career and junior talent. I was just wondering if any of you have noticed any unique strengths or challenges with this next generation of talent that's coming into the marketplace. It changes with every generation, and just how you've been responding to equipping them to be successful in their careers, especially to your point, given that this is a novel time for everybody and that the hybrid work can be really tough for people who are early on in their career.
I'd say sort of a couple of points. So one on the technical side actually goes back to your question around critical thinking. One of the areas we've sort of struggled most with is around some of the sort of rigor and discipline of the work, right? So you don't just immediately jump into building an algorithm, you have to understand your data, right? And so we had a lot of conversations with people who are newer in the field of go back and check your data, right? I want to see distributions, I want to see outliers, I want to see what we're doing, right? Do you really understand what you're inputting into your model? Long before we let you sort of get to the model stage. So that's one where it's more of a, maybe like a training piece. I think to the hybrid remote, sort of our team has been distributed because we're not really back in the office yet. And so trying to figure out how to onboard, how to make people feel included. And that's really for us been trying to do personal connection, right? Both individually and then as a team. Making sure, to your point earlier of making sure that when we're doing things that are in an office, we're not excluding the people who can't join, right? We're finding ways to approach that, which might mean that those of us that are in the office, we all just get on a video screen so that, right, it's sort of, we're all equal boxes around the round table kind of thing. So hopefully that helps a little.
Yeah, there are techniques. I mean, the reality is you should have a buddy for everybody coming into a company. I mean, the reality is they've all lived through it, and it's not their manager, and if you're lucky, they're not even in their same department, but there's somebody that they can call, And then to your point about, it's funny, my days in IBM, we actually got rid of all the offices in those days because they were in trouble. And so we learned the early hybrid, learning what it means to be inclusive on a call, waiting and listening to the other person before you interrupt. And a hybrid is even worse when there's 6 people in an office and you're on the phone or you're in a screen. The people in that room and the people on the phone are not at equal weights because somebody went to the bathroom with somebody else and told them something on the way because they're leaving and coming with the people that are there. And so you have to create environments for people that are coming out, particularly now. I mean, think of the people that are graduating from school now over the last 3 years. They've been in their homes, they've been in all kinds of places going to school, they've been isolated from humans, and now you're going to drop them into an environment that doesn't have any structure. because most businesses don't think about structure. They don't think about, oh, I'm going to take somebody through this career path. And so it's incumbent on the employer to recognize the challenges of the upcoming generation. On the same hand, the upcoming generation is incredible. They're coming with ideas that you don't have in your business, and you want to embrace those ideas. And so this marrying of I'll call it in some ways the lost generation, but the one that has the future in their hands, and the current generation of workers is going to be incredible in the future.
Well, I was just going to say, I'll keep it very real. I think the millennials are likely going to be the lost generation coming out of the pandemic. And there's a reason why I say that. I talked to a private equity partner, very large, multi-billion-dollar fund. And he said, look, the partners are coming in, and the Gen Zers are in the office because they're eager to learn and walk the halls and get access to these partners that are in the office. But the millennials don't want to come in.
And they don't even know.
Yeah.
They don't even know to come in.
Exactly. And I'm not trying to dock the millennials, because look, the millennials and the Gen Xers are in this really interesting life stage where, they got married, they bought a house, they moved to the suburbs, they don't want to commute, so on and so forth. All these things that are happening. But we really have to be careful about, again, having a very good structure around hybrid. There's a debate right now, should everybody go to a 4-day work week? Okay, so if we do, what does that mean? But I think that the Gen Zers are really, really excited and to have access to some of the senior talent within the organization. It's the first time they're getting access because they're in the office and those guys are in the office. So they're creating opportunities for themselves because they're showing up. And I think the millennials have an opportunity to kind of change the dialogue in a way that they want to take the organization. So I think we really have to be careful within that generation as far as what I'm seeing.
We have 2 recommendations for early career professionals. One is make sure you find a source that's reputable for industry insights. Stay intellectually curious and keep to that source so you're educating yourself on where the industry is, but also where it's going. And then 2, it kind of plays off John's point of having a buddy in a company. Have a mentor in the industry. Data scientists are a very sought after, high caliber, but still somewhat niche cohort. So, conferences like this, we like to, I mentioned WIDS, and also, just through your professional network, maybe university, find a mentor as well.